Yeah, this is today's video. This time from Edinburgh rather than from the woods in Midlothian. It's only 10 miles difference, but it feels very, very different. I mean, I've got trees around me, but that's just because it's actually hot today. It doesn't happen very often in Edinburgh, but today is generally a hot day and I want to be in the shade. And today's video I think is really, really fitting considering what the series of videos is about. Which is just the process of coming up with ideas, and really I'm more interested in coming up with article ideas because alongside the job search at the moment, I'm trying to freelance. That's meant to be my income base until I find a job. It's just actually pitching articles isn't working out as much as I'd like at the moment. So yeah, talking about that process of coming up with ideas. And every single video I do at the moment, although they're fairly free form because the main thing I'm trying to do is just get used to speaking on the camera, I still need to have some kind of idea. But this time, in the previous videos, I challenged myself to just keep the video playing because the idea was just to get comfortable on the camera, and I realized from previous stuff I've done before, if you keep on pausing the video because you made a mistake, well, you never really get over that speaking block. So every sentence has to be recorded separately and then stitched together. So it is important to get used to just speaking. But this time I feel like it's getting a little bit easier now. So although I'm still aiming to keep on speaking, there will be some editing later on. Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind when I was writing notes for this, what is it about coming up with article ideas or just coming up with creative ideas that's so difficult? And really it's a matter of pressures. There's the pressure from yourself, whether you like it or not. There's some sort of egotistical element that stops you. It's not necessarily that it's hard to produce content, but there's that element of judgment, and trying to get over that barrier is very, very important. In order to actually come up with ideas, you have to just accept them rather than worrying. And that's really quite difficult, especially when you're trying to make money off it, because there's this side of things where, with every article you try and write, you're not just writing it for yourself, but you have to persuade an editor that it's a good idea. And that can be very, very difficult. It means that you're not just writing what you think is good, but you have to think, what are other people going to want to read? Easier said than done. And yeah, there's that thing, it's if you have the pressure that you have to make money from it, which if you're freelancing you kind of do, that's an added pressure. It's a little bit scary to think that if you don't get the ideas out, then you make no money. If you don't make any money, then you can't pay the rent, you can't pay for your food, that kind of thing. I have a place to stay at the moment, so that pressure is not really there, and I'm thankful for that. But in general, that is a constant pressure of freelancing. There's still the personal pressure to make money, to make a living, to eventually be able to support myself. If someone sets you tasks, then you just do them, and there's no worry about that. You just have the direction set for you. But if you're coming up with your own creative ideas, then you have to also be a networker as well, or at least a much stronger networker than you would need to be if you were just employed to do something. Because it's that network that gets your ideas recognized. Now, if you're just creating for yourself, that's not a problem. But if you're trying to share that, or if you're trying to freelance, if you're trying to make a living off it, then you need a network that supports you, which means that you have to prove yourself in some way. Now obviously I've had to try and find ways of getting around some of these blocks. Yeah, one of the really, really interesting ideas I came across, and I can't remember where I found this, it was just some website, some entrepreneur who was a massive creator of content, talked about like the process of finding ideas is a little bit like a skateboarder looking for new places to skate. So the idea is if you're a skateboarder, wherever you look, you find something that you could try and skate on, like some new trick that you could pull. If you're writing, or if you're trying to produce, oh dear, I'm blocking the video. if you're trying to produce articles or videos or something, then that's kind of the stage that you're trying to reach, where you just look around, or wherever you go, you get inspired, that there's something to think about and write about. There wasn't any advice on how you get to that stage there, but it was an interesting idea in itself, that you should just be able to pull on your surroundings. Now, I get that when you're writing creatively, but I haven't got to that point yet where you're just able to every day draw some sort of inspiration and think, hey, there's an idea that I can write about, or find a new angle. I mean, it's possible, but actually getting to that stage is tricky. I had to take a break there because my arm was aching. Try using the other hand and you just end up blocking the camera, so that's no good. Like that, which is not what I'm going for. But yeah, recently I think the source which has been really useful to me in getting over some of those blocks on how you can just come up with ideas was a book which I came across at the start of this year by a writer called Beth Kempton. So her book was, what's it called? The Way of the Fearless Writer, I think it's called. And so she splits up the process of coming up with ideas into 3 different stages, which she calls gaseous writing, liquid writing, and then solid writing. At least I think those are the terms she uses. The idea is that most of us, when we're trying to write, we tend to aim for what she calls solid writing straight away. This kind of complete, perfectly formed text where everything is in the right place, every sentence is perfect, the right words are everywhere, everything's neat, grammatically correct. Whereas there are looser stages that you can rely on beforehand and actually will result in much more creative thinking and actually coming up with the ideas you need. So the loosest form of this is what she was calling gaseous writing, which doesn't really have any particular purpose in itself. It's so loose that you just write what comes to mind. It's a sort of very meditative process where you just sit down, calm down, maybe actually meditate a bit beforehand, and then just splurge on the page whatever comes to mind. It doesn't even need to be full sentences, it doesn't need to be full words, you just write. And then afterwards review it. Now that was really quite a valuable idea to me, because it made me realize, when I write, I was beforehand was trying to get to some stage of perfection before it was the right time. And the result of that is that you end up panicking for ideas and you write very slowly because each sentence just has to be meticulously written. It's not a good process. It's certainly not really a creative process either. It's very important because in the end, you can't just share splurge words on a page. They might not make sense to anybody but yourself. Depending on how gaseous your writing was, it might not even make any sense to you. And then there's a next stage, this liquid stage, which, as you can expect, is very much like a flow writing stage. So you've developed an idea from the gaseous writing. And then through liquid writing, you just go with it. Again, don't worry about it too much, but you have an aim. There's a road to follow. And then you use that to come up with full texts. Now that's a really reduced form of what the book says. And I think I might have also skewed things a little bit. But then once you've gone through that liquid state of writing, then comes a solid state writing, which most people seem to start with. That's the editing stage, that's the structural stage, where all of those ideas that you've developed from a much more free-form way of writing can all be stitched together. But by going through that more loose process at the start, you've come up with the ideas, you've let yourself free up a bit. That was a really valuable idea to me. And actually even today, this book has got little prompts in it you can experiment with. And even today in my diary, I was writing on one of those prompts and actually carry that book with me most places I go. That's how valuable it's been to me. So yeah, now I guess in a way I'm trying to apply those ideas to these little videos. Expectation that it's going to be perfect from the start and perfectly edited. And it was only when I said to myself, well, hang on, let's just get the video out and speak. Let's have like a gaseous writing style video, just a monologue where you speak at the camera and see what comes out. And now I guess I could consider this, after a week of doing this, moving on to that more flow stage. We start with an idea, which I had written in my book, and I'm going to allow myself a little bit of editing, but not too much. And then maybe in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, I'll shift on to a more complete piece. So yeah, today's video is just a couple of ideas on ideas. How do you produce, most importantly for me at the moment, written content, but also just creative content as a whole. And trying to relax into the process a bit, only to polish it later. I think that seems to be a really valuable way of trying to produce content. Not putting too much pressure on yourself. Letting it grow, always being open to ideas, and then developing it from a starting point. As for successfully pitching those loose ideas to editors in a way that makes them listen, I'm still working on that.